Hey guys, and welcome to episode 2 of the Geek Corner. Today we are talking about a very awesome movie from my childhood, The Mummy from 1999, which is a remake of the original movie from the 1930s. I love this movie a lot, and this is how me and my co-host became friends was because of this movie. So with that being said, I am Matt.
That makes me Tessa.
All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So, The Mummy. When was your first time really interacting with this movie? You had mentioned before we were talking that you didn't really have a whole lot of movie theaters where you grew up. So, when was your first interaction with this movie?
The movie had been out definitely for, I would say, at least 6 months before I really got to see it for the first time on VHS. But it was definitely something that I was interested in because I had this really big obsession with everything ancient Egyptian growing up. So as soon as I saw this, and then of course Brendan Fraser, who I already was in love with all his other movies, I knew immediately that I definitely wanted to see it.
Yeah, the Mummy is definitely one of those movies. I knew of the 1930s movie back when I was a kid because I used to watch all the black and white movies. And so when this one was coming out, it was one of those moments where you're like, "Wow, this looks good." I mean, think about how all those old movies, the stop motion dinosaur movies, like King Kong and just all those, old movies from the 50s and everything. And then you go to Jurassic Park and it's like, holy moly, these dinosaurs look real. They're not stop motion, which is funny because they did want to use stop motion for Jurassic Park. You can actually see some footage of that, but that's for a whole different video. So basically the Mummy 1999 was going into and it was basically going from the old 30s black and white movies to this like great special effects at the time. Some of the effects, yeah, I feel like they don't hold up today. We'll talk about that later, but it was just one of those movies where it was like, yeah. And this was around the time, so they had already remade Dracula with Bram Stoker's Dracula. They had already remade Frankenstein with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So The Mummy was basically next on the remake block. I don't know if those other two movies were from Universal, but this one was in fact from Universal, and it was basically the start of the whole. Let's bring our old monster movies back. So The Mummy was the first one for a while. We didn't get the Wolfman until many years later, about 10 years after The Mummy came out. We got the Wolfman. So this was the first one to really bring them into the modern times, and it was a movie I definitely saw in theaters. We saw it in the big surround sound theater. It was I don't know if they're around anymore, but it was Tinseltown. I think they're all Cinemarks now, which at one point it turned into Rave, and Rave is now no longer with us. That movie theater sucked anyways. Um, but yeah, they're all Cinemarks now, and it was the first time where we'd actually had stadium seating in a movie theater. I mean, I saw Star Wars Episode One there. I begged my mom to go watch The Lost World there because I said I don't want to watch this in a small theater. I want to watch it in the big theater with the surround sound. And then we saw The Mummy there, and then later that year we saw Sleepy Hollow there, which was also awesome in theaters. I can't wait to talk about Sleepy Hollow. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, I first like you. I was a big fan of the ancient Egyptian stuff, and I had first seen the commercial for this when I was watching a Inside King Tut's Tomb on Fox back when they did not have any programming other than The Simpsons. Uh, and we saw the commercial, and I remember my parents saying, "We gotta watch this," because they grew up with the old one. You know, they grew up with the ones from the 30s. I grew up with movies, and you as well. We grew up with movies that started getting more special effects and more crazy effects and everything. I mean, like I said, Jurassic Park was the first movie to like really, oh my god, these effects are insane. So
I grew up in the Michael Bay era.
we did grow up in the Michael Bay area when everything was blown. Okay, Michael Bay's movies were better in the '90s than they are now. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Bad
Yeah.
Boys, Armageddon, The Rock. I'm losing track. I forget what else. Oh, Enemy of the State. That was
Oh,
Michael Bay. Transformers One. I know it's not the '90s, but Transformers One was good, and then after that, the rest of the series.
yeah.
Anyways, so a little plot crunch on the Mummy. basically the movie is the character, the mummy, or he wasn't a mummy when he started, but Imhotep had an affair with the pharaoh's mistress. They got down to business. Pharaoh found out. They killed the pharaoh, uh, buried Imhotep alive, and then many years later, Rachel Weisz's character Evie's like, "Hey, I know of this place where the Book of the Dead is," or I'm sorry, her brother tells her of this big job and everything, and so she's like, "Hey, we're gonna go on this job, but we need somebody who knows the area. You know how to read hieroglyphics. Let's go on this big grand adventure," and it just turns into a crap storm from beginning to end. And we won't go too much into detail here. We're gonna do a breakdown of the movie and everything. But did I miss anything on the plot?
Oh, so we did find out that the only reason Jonathan knew of the mummy and the treasure is because he stole the little key box from Rick
Right,
O'Connell. So
right,
he stole it from him, and that's how Rick O'Connell ended up in that prison. So
right.
all
Okay,
connects.
okay. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump on into the breakdown of the movie. Um, so it starts off, and you see the big wide shot of the Sphinx and just Egypt. And a lot of people say this is where some of the CGI is kind of, but I think it looks cool. I think it's still, for a movie that came out at the end of the 90s, I think it still holds up pretty damn well, if you ask me. It still looks pretty good compared to hmm, compared to some movies now where they just kind of half-ass their CGI. It still looks pretty good. And so pans out.
Agree with you. I agree with you. For
Yeah,
the time, the CGI was great.
yeah, and they were just getting started with the CGI. Like they were really trying to, get it working. I mean, CGI is upgrading and evolving almost every single year. A new movie comes out. This, except for Thor: Love and Thunder. I won't get into that. The CGI is just evolving more and more and more and more. And this is one of those movies where it was the first movie where you're like, wow, we had Jurassic Park about 4 or 5 years ago. Dang, um, or maybe it was 7 years before this. I don't remember. And so you get the wide shot of Egypt, and they're panning across, and then after a little bit, you hear Ardeth Bay start talking, and he's telling the story of Imhotep and how he was cursed to basically. Well, he's not really going into that yet, but he's talking about Pharaoh and Mistress and how she cannot be touched. And they're just showing all the workers and everything building the pyramids and the Sphinx and everything. And then so you see Imhotep standing there looking at all of them, and he was the high priest of the Pharaoh, correct? So he's looking at everything, and then Anaxunamun or Naxuyaman, whatever they say her name different in each movie, or sorry, the first two movies. So she comes up, and they start getting down to business, like right then and there. They're just making out, that's all. But he makes the mistake of putting his hand on her shoulder, and Art of the Bay had just said, "She no touch," and he rubs his thumb against her paint, and it I think it's the part of the black and gold that rubs off, and you're thinking, the audience is like, "Uh-oh, you messed up, sir." So Pharaoh comes in, and she's just standing there with her hand on like a lion statue, just la di da, nothing's happening. And she's trying to hide it. She knew it was at this moment he knew he screwed up, so she's trying to hide it, and he notices, and he's like, "Oh, what's that? What you doing? What happened?" And this is when Imhotep comes out, stabs him. She stabs him. There's one big stabby party, and somehow the guards get notified. I don't know how they got notified, but again, we find out in the second movie. I'm not gonna talk about it now, but we find out in the second movie how they got notified and got there so quickly because he wasn't making a whole lot of noise. You're like, that doesn't make any sense. How the heck did? Okay, whatever. It's a movie. I don't care. So, because of this, because they killed the pharaoh and he, had his way with the mistress, they have to bury him alive. And the thing about this, behind the scenes, they actually did cover him up in the medical tape and band aids and and bandages and everything. So when you're watching the movie and you look at Arnold Vosloo's face, his eyes are as big as grapefruits because he is terrified of being wrapped up and put inside that coffin. I would be too. If you ask me, if I was wrapped up like that and I couldn't move my arms like this, I'd be a nervous freaking wreck too. So, anything you want to add to that before we move on to the next scene or the next bit of the movie?
I mean, the movie critic in me, I mean, as much as I love this movie and I still love this movie, the movie critic in me is sitting here going, okay, they painted her to not be touched. Are we going to pretend like she doesn't sit down anywhere ever on a chair or like lean against a
Well, if
wall?
you remember, she had the chainmail on her butt. She had the booty chainmail, so that's probably that was like her cape. I guess when she sits down, no, she doesn't sit. That's why she's standing at all times. Um, so yeah, now that I think about it, yeah, I don't know. So that happens, and they're just talking, and this is when we get the logo, right? When they show the Sphinx, and then it just the sand goes across and it's the music's getting louder and louder and louder. Jerry Goldsmith, by the way, he did this and Total Recall and some other movies that I don't remember off the top of my head right now. But you see the Mummy, the title, and it just the sand. It's all fancy and gold and everything, but then the sand goes across and basically not really disintegrates it, but makes it look older. Same thing with the. It was the oh my god, I can't think of what they're called right now. The giant wolf things, Anubis statue sitting there, and you
Oh,
see it just deteriorate over the years. And this is when Rick and Benny and his crew come in. And why exactly are they fighting again? Because I don't really remember what the deal was here.
so I believe Rick O'Connell was, brought into like the British Army, and during that time, the British Army were very imperial, and colonizing a lot of countries and nations. So I believe that's what they were doing there.
Okay.
They were trying to colonize, but the locals were not happy about it.
Yeah, because they're shooting, they're popping caps and shooting everything in sight. So they're in like this little war, this little battle and everything. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. I have no idea what's going on right now. But it was at this moment when the ground starts to shake, and I remember all the guys, all the other dudes, just they ran off. They're like, "Uh oh, time to peace out and get out of here." They run away, and I think he says something like, "Where are they going?" And it says something like, "I guess we won" or something like that. I can't really remember what they say, but it was some little joke where they ran away, and he's like, "I guess they're giving up." But that's when the ground starts shaking, and all the sand around Rick starts to just turn in a circular motion, and you're like, "What in the world is going on here?" And that's when the big blah face comes out of the ground that looks like the man on the moon. That you know what it looked like to me when I saw this. There's an episode of the X Files where this guy sees a face in his ceiling. He was like an astronaut, and he went to the moon, and he's like, "I saw some stuff that freaked me out," but he sees a face in the ceiling. It's one of those like popcorn ceilings. In fact, if I look at my ceiling now, I can kind of see that face. It looked like that, and it kind of scared me because that episode terrified me. And you're just like, whoa, there's a big old face in the middle of the ground here, and it stays there. But it's also the resting place of Imhotep. That's where he is. So Benny is already taken off at this point, and doesn't he tell him "Good luck, O'Connell" or something like that?
No, because O'Connell says, "You're with me, buddy," and Benny, in a shaky voice, says, "To the end," and he stands there for a little bit while the other army's charging, and then maybe for about 2.5 seconds stands there, and then he just turns around and runs.
Right, just like the coward he is. Um, but yeah, he runs away, and then I think it's this point where it just kind of sits there, but then it moves on over, it transitions over to Evie in the library, correct?
Mhm.
All right, so
Yeah.
Evie's there reading hieroglyphics and everything, and she's going through the library, just reading her books, doing her reading. And this is when a skeleton arm pops out of the coffin to basically be a jump scare to scare the audience and also scare her. And she was scared for a brief moment and then realizes it's her brother Jonathan, who's just the absolute jokester, trickster. He's the comedic relief of the movie. And he's, I think this is the point where he tells her, "Hey, there is a job I have, but I need somebody to read hieroglyphics. And I have this little puzzle box thing." And he does, I don't think they knew that that it opened yet. They're just kind of messing with it, and she starts reading it, right? And then it just kind of pops open, if I'm not mistaken.
So she's reading the hieroglyphs, and she understands that the hieroglyphs are telling her that she has to turn the top of it in a certain direction. So she turns it just slightly, and that's when it opens up and we find the map inside.
Okay. And this is where they find out that it's the map to the city of the dead,
Right.
right? Okay.
Hamanoptera.
Hamanoptera. And correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't she ask how Jonathan gets it and he said he just found it or something like that? Didn't say that he
I think
pickpocketed it
he
off of
tells
Rick.
her that yeah, I think he tells her that he won it in a poker game,
That's right. That's right. And
but we know that's not how he really got it.
she's kind of questioning it. And I think it's at this point, or did the collapsing of the book, the library pillars already happen, or is this after she meets Jonathan?
I think the collapsing of the library happens first, and then like when she's trying to put stuff back together,
Is when he does it.
that's
Okay.
when Jonathan pops in. Yeah.
And then that's when this is when Dr. Terrence Bay or Eric Avari. I don't want to say his actor name because y'all might not know who. Terrence Bay, the bald guy with the beard, who was also in Encino Man. He played the store clerk, but he comes in and they're talking about everything. And I think doesn't she show him? Doesn't she show him the map? I'm trying to remember how he gets involved. No, that's not until later. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's later.
So when okay, so yes, this is when Jonathan comes in and he's telling her about the job, and he says, I pickpocketed, I won this in a poker game, and they go through the whole thing. They find the map. Um, isn't it at this point when they end up at, or they transition to the prison? I'm trying to remember how they end up at the prison because I
Well,
know I might be missing a little scene here.
they both realize that the two of them, even though she is extremely intelligent with reading hieroglyphics and everything, they both realize that the two of them are not going to be able to make it through the Egyptian desert and
Right.
the dry abyss. So they need somebody who's been there before and can get them directly to there. So that it was at that point he goes, "Oh, maybe the guy I stole this from would be the best option,
Yeah, and
huh?"
she says something about I thought you won in a poker game.
Yeah.
So okay, now I remember. So they end up at the prison, and they go to Rick's cell, and he's looking all like George of the Jungle. No joke, he looks just like George of the Jungle in here. I wonder if they couldn't have been filming the movies at the same time, could they? I don't know.
No, no.
So they go up, and I think the first thing he does is punch Jonathan in the face, right?
Yep.
Just punches him in the face, and then he says, "Eh, at the time, guys," he says, "and who's the broad?" As in, who's the lady? That's how they spoke back then. So he says that, and she gets all offended. I mean, for good reason, because that was kind of a not cool thing to say back then. So she gets offended, and this is when she's trying to tell him we have a map to Hamanoptera, and he goes, "Nope, not going." He doesn't. No, not go. He says, "I know how to get there, but I'm not going." And I forget why he's getting hung, but they're gonna hang him.
I believe he's accused of theft.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
They're gonna hang him. So it's essentially like getting your hand cut off, like what they were gonna do in Aladdin. They were gonna cut his or Jasmine's hand off because they thought she was stealing, which she kind of was, wasn't she? So he's sitting there and they're hanging him, and I didn't know this until a few years ago, but he actually was hanging,
Yeah,
and
he almost
he
died.
almost
He
died filming this.
died.
So they had to. Didn't he pass out?
Yeah, he
Okay.
he went unconscious.
Yeah, and they had to bring him back. So and you could see it in the scene. You can see him just like Arnold Vosloo. You can see him sitting there struggling, and he's like, this dude's losing his breath here. And so she's trying to bargain with the warden. I guess you would say that was the warden, right? The warden of the prison, the short,
Yeah. Yes.
weird, pervy guy. She's trying to bargain with him, and they keep going higher and higher and higher with the price. And then he says, something like, "What else? I'm a very lonely man." And she slaps him like, "Get off me." So they finally strike a deal, and it's like a number lower than what he wanted. And she goes, "Deal," and he gets mad. He's like, "Fine, cut him down." So they cut him down, and then he's looking at her, and she's like, "You're going to Hamanoptera with this." And I think it's this point when they go in transition into the boat area, right? And she's like, "I can't believe we're taking him. He's scraggly and that this and that this and that. He shows up clean shaven, haircut, and she's like, "Oh, hello." Um, so it's at this point when they realize, okay, maybe he's not so useless after all. I think is this the part where, or is it? Does it go into the next scene where they meet the other Americans on the ship as well, on the cargo ship?
So I believe they meet each other in a hotel, like where the little like
Right,
inn area,
right,
and they're all kind of like sitting around a bar, and then they all hear that each other is heading to the same place for the same, basically end game, and so they decide that because they realize that Benny got hired for the other set of guys.
right.
The other set of guys hired Benny for the same thing, so they were like, "Hey, let's team up for now, and then we'll get the race on and see who can get there first."
Right. So they're like, may the best team win, this and that. And I think this is the next scene where it's on the boat and her and Rick are talking about something and she's just distracted by him because, he's just a handsome man to her. And I think isn't she explaining to him why they're going to Hamanoptera and everything?
So she's trying to go into history and the background, and he's just sitting there going, "Don't care,
Right.
don't
Right.
care."
He's just there as the, I guess you would say the muscle. But I do remember after this, it kind of goes a little bit. Everybody's sleeping and everything, and then I forget who the Arnold Bay's guys show up.
The Magi,
The Magi,
Magi.
yeah, they show up, and that's exactly who it was at the beginning that captured Imhotep and put him in his sarcophagus and wrapped him up in bandages and everything. Was the Magi? Thank you. I'm forgetting all of this. But thank you so much for reminding me. Um, so they sneak onto the ship and they're just like, I think they're trying to get the box back, correct?
Yeah, they're basically trying to do anything they can to keep them from
From getting
continuing
there.
on their quest.
Right. And so at this point, they're the bad guys to Rick and other cowboys. They are the bad guys to them. So they just get in this gunfight and the whole ship goes up in flames. Goes up in flames, all because a little torch fell and I think it fell into a haystack and that was it. So when does Rick find out that Benny is working for them? Because we kind of jumped over that. I know that they run into each other again at some point, and he's like, "Hey, you left me, you jerk."
I believe that they find out at the inn when they come down to that like main like lobby area where there's like a saloon
Right.
bar. So that's where they all meet in the first. I believe that's where he finds out that Benny hired them to do the same thing. But I gotta say, at the end of the scene where the boat is burning is one of my favorite, and I still use this line with my best friend Mary. We still use this line when we're yelling at each other, and it's "Hey O'Connell, I have all the horses," and then Ray's like, "Hey Benny, looks to me like you're on the wrong side of the river."
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and so they have a little bit of a delay getting to that point, and so Rick and Evie and Jonathan are going on their merry way, and I think they find so they're at one end of Hamanoptera and Benny's at the other end of Hamanoptera. So what happens is I don't think I think they find the mummy first, right? And they're chipping away at this thing, and then the isn't it the sarcophagus just falls, and then they lift it up. They're like, oh, okay, whatever. I'm trying to remember exactly what happens because both teams find something. Just one has worse luck than the others.
Well,
Correct
okay,
me.
so the
Yeah,
way it happens is Benny and the Cowboys have the horses, but they're on the wrong side of the river, so they have to go the long way
right,
around. So Rick and Evie and Jonathan have to go into town and get some camels, so that kind of evens out their
right.
time frame. So they all show up at the same time, but then they have this race to get to the Hominoptera
Oh
City
yeah, yeah, yeah,
outline,
yeah.
and then they say whoever gets there first gets dibs.
Right.
So they have this big race, and I believe it's actually the Cowboys. No, Evie got there first.
Yeah.
I believe Evie got there first, and then they do find the book. I think Evie holds the key secret. Like nobody knows that Evie has the key. She hides that. But they're all going in there and they say, okay, you get this side of Hominoptera, we get this side.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they start you kind of chiseling away
Right.
at a section, and sure enough, that boom
All right.
falls underneath.
So we're caught up now, and
Mhm.
I remember, doesn't it switch over to the Cowboys? It's kind of going back and forth in this scene. It's showing
It
who's
does.
on this side doing one thing and who's on this side. And if I remember correctly, they opened their box first, and they shouldn't have done it. They're doing it, and Benny's like backing up, like, "Yo, let me get out of here." And you don't know why. You're like, he's just a coward. He ran off and left Rick. He's a coward. He's spineless, but he knew what was going on. He knew exactly what was going to happen. I think because once that thing opens, the workers just, I don't know what was it, salt, acid, just pressurized sand that just like melted their skin away, and
Yeah,
that
so
kind of scared me when I saw this. I was like, oh god.
yeah, yeah, no, and this is kind of where I liked them actually staying pretty true to historical fact, because this was actually a really common booby trap that ancient
Mhm.
Egyptians used, and it was like this pressurized, like acid salt
Yeah.
thing. And yeah, it was actually a real trick that they used to keep tomb raiders from raiding their tombs.
Oh, Lara Croft. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that happened, and I'm like, oh god. And it looked like the guy at the end of RoboCop that gets thrown into the toxic waste. That was disgusting. I'll talk about that when we get to that episode. But yeah, it happened, and all the Americans are like, they're like back, right? Because they got these workers to do this for them, so they didn't have to. Meanwhile, that happens, and that's all you see of that is just, oh god, pressurized acid sand melted all them away. And I think, don't they still get open the thing open that they were looking for? And
So
I guess it's just a
they
bunch of
open
jewels and stuff, right?
no, they open the crate. The of course the poor worker guys get the acid and they get all dissolved. But they said, okay, well it's open. Might as well go get what's inside. So what's inside are the canopic jars,
With
and
the
the canopic
scarab
jars have
beetles.
organs. Yes, so they each take their own canopic jar and carry it off, and then that's how we get to another part that's further on in the movie.
Right. Okay. I'm remembering that. Yeah. So then they switch over to, this is when they switch over to O'Connell and everybody, and this is when he's chipping away, knocking in the sarcophagus because the coffin falls, as we said before, and so they lift it back up, but they still got to open it, and they're just prying away at this thing. And meanwhile, Warden dude is off doing whatever, looking for scarab beetles, right? And he's just boop, 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 pulling them off the wall, and you're like, should you be doing that, sir? If I was in a tomb like this, I wouldn't be touching a damn thing. I've seen Indiana Jones. I know how this works. I would not touch anything. Everything's booby trapped. So he's just plugging away, pulling them off, but he doesn't realize that I think he puts one in his bag and it somehow breaks out of its shell and bites him and goes in. Oh, no, he's looking at it, right? And then it breaks out of his shell and goes into his hand. And it goes, this actually scared me too when it happened. I was like, oh. And it goes into his hand, basically here, just crawls down his arm, all the way up his arm, basically into his brain. And it makes him just go crazy. And I think this is around the time, I think after they open the mummy's tomb, after they open Imhotep's tomb, and I just remember it pops open and Rick screaming like, ah. I think this is when the guy runs down the hallway screaming and just runs, boom, smack dab into the
Boom.
wall and just dead right there, cracks his head, and he's dead. I mean, he hit that wall. And when you watch it in slow motion, you see the wall actually go boom, so you can see the wall move because it actually wasn't a real wall. It's funny. So that's when that happens. He gets killed, and that's it. That's no more of no more Warden. Bye bye. And then it's this point when they transition again into the after party, I guess you can call it, and they're just sitting there. Oh, the Cowboys did find the book. They did find the book because that's gonna play into the movie in just a second. So they're Rick's talking to one of the other Cowboys, and he says, "I call them Cowboys because I don't know their damn names." Um, I I do know who the librarian was, by the way. That was Alan Parrish's dad from Jumanji. Also, he's been in some other stuff. He played Van Pelt in in Jumanji as well. Anyways, sorry, I meant to say that. So they're talking to each other, and he goes, "I heard you guys found yourselves a nice juicy mummy," and I forget what Rick says to them about their workers, but they're just kind of chit chatting, having a good time, and then everybody's asleep. But Evie's walking around like, "I need to get that book," and so she takes it from Jonathan Hyde's character, and ever so slightly, and they use the key because they didn't know she had it, like you said. So she uses the key to open the book, and this is the Book of the Dead, right?
Yes,
So is it the Necronomicon or is it just the Book of the Dead?
it's just Book of the Dead.
Okay, I didn't know if they called it the Necronomicon in there because Evil Dead did that too. So she's reading, and I think it's when the wind
Well,
blows,
let,
right?
let me let me let
Okay,
me
go
preface
ahead.
so it's Book of the Dead, but they also call it the Book of Anubis because
Right.
Anubis was the god of the underworld. So they switch back and forth between those titles.
Okay, I see. That's why I got you here. I don't remember all that. Um, yeah. So the book, she's reading it, and if I remember, the wind kind of just right. And doesn't Rick say something like maybe we should close it or something like that? He says something to where it's like, yeah, let's not read from this.
He basically pulls a Han Solo. I have a bad feeling about this.
Right.
Uh, it's basically what he says, but Evie just opens up the book and just happens to read the exact passage that needed to be read to wake old Imhotep up. And right as soon as she finishes the last word, that gust of wind blows through.
Movie
And then Mr.
magic.
Librarian wakes up and
Yep.
freaks out.
And he
You must
screams.
not read from the book.
Right. And then it's this point when you see Imhotep standing there. Whoa, no, no, no. She's reading, and as she's reading, you see Imhotep's skeleton just. It looks like Sylvester Stallone's at the end of Rocky. And no, really, his jaw was just like crooked and shit. And so it's zooming in on him, and when she gets to that one passage, he wakes up and screams, and that's when the librarian jumps up and yells out, "You shouldn't read from the book." And they're like, "What's going on?" And I think isn't that when all the flames go out at
Yep.
once,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then after this, they're like, "We got to get the oh, that's the swarm of locusts, wasn't it? That comes after them because it happens
So
twice,
I believe once that whole thing happens, like the workers immediately know what's going on because they're from there. So
and they leave.
they
They're like, "Peace, we're out."
ditch. Yeah, they ditch. And the cowboys kind of make fun of them, like, superstitious, crazy people.
Yeah,
And then then the locust thing starts coming, and then they start going, hold on.
yeah. Because I was trying to remember how they got into the tomb, like how they went back inside, and it was because of the locusts were coming at them. So they're like, "We gotta get out of here." And so they go in there, and I think it's this point when they're in there, and there's still workers that are there, right? Because some of them get eaten by the scarabs when they're running off. This scene reminded me a lot of the Lost World when the T Rex is chasing them at the camp, and they're chasing after all the hunt. Or I'm sorry, she no, yeah, she, the female Rex is going after all the hunters, and they end up in that waterfall. Great scene. Um, so they're running away, and some of the workers get caught in the scarabs, and they're just eaten alive basically. And somehow they all get split up. So you got Rick's group is in one spot. No, they're all split up. Evie's in some other area, and Rick is in some other area. Jonathan's in some other area, and then I think the Cowboys also get split up because the only one, the poor guy with the glasses, no, yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry,
Rick and Jonathan
I'm
get
getting ahead of
split up
myself here.
together, and then Evie is by herself, and then the cowboys. Yeah, the
Right, and
cowboys do get split up. You're right. The cowboys do get split up.
it's this point when the guy with the glasses falls and he says, "Hey," and "Can somebody help me find me?" He pulls a Velma. I can't see without my glasses. And he's like, "I need somebody to help my glasses because he may help me find my glat." And he stops because Benny stepped on him and broke him. And he realizes, "Oh crap!" So he picks him up and he's trying to see and he can't. And I think, do we see him interact with Imhotep, or is it just when Evie comes
All
up
he sees is this fuzzy outline of a
and he doesn't know
body.
what it is?
He doesn't know that it's Imhotep.
Yeah. So I think you just see it, and I think this is when you see Evie kind of running around. I'm trying to remember which scene came first, but you see her running around, and then she goes up to him, and I forget the guy's name, Mr. Cooper. We'll just call him Mr. Cooper, or Glasses Man. And she says, "Oh my God, thank God you're here." And she turns around, and he's muffling. You're like, "What the hell?" And he turns around, no tongue, no eyes, and it's just like, oh crap, he took his eyes and his tongue. And he says that he's like he's trying to speak. He's like he took
Took
my
my
tongue, he took my eyes,
tongue.
right?
Yeah.
And so he goes away, doesn't die. He just goes away, and here comes Imhotep. Eyes, tongue, still got a hole in his head. And I think he says something to her
Hmm.
that makes him remember. Doesn't he think she's an Moon or something?
He looks at her and says, "Anaxuna moon."
Right. And part of this, like I said, plays into the second movie. We will discuss that. That's actually one of my favorite ones of the series is The Mummy Returns. So this is when Rick comes up. And I always love this part because it plays into the later in the movie, but Imhotep screams at him and he's got the long mouth, and then Rick screams back at him and shoots him. And that's when they take off. And I think they get Glasses Dude out too at this point as well, because after this, I remember they're back at the hotel talking, or they're just kind of like, what are we going to do? You know, you people read from the book, you shouldn't have done that, yada, 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 yada. Well, you this, you that. It was a he said, she said kind of thing. They were kind of going back and forth. Well, you did this, well, you did that, this and that. He's looking for these jars, or I don't think we found out about that yet. I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but they're they're sitting there and they got their buddy in the room, the guy with no eyes and no tongue because he can't go anywhere. So they got him in there and they're like, hey, I think his name was, one of them was named Tex. I'm pretty sure. So they're like, we're going to go down to the bar or we're going to go to the library or something. They were going to go somewhere to figure out how to deal with this situation. And so they leave him there. And then after a bit, keyhole, sand starts coming through. Like there's a key in it, and I think he knocks it out, and the sand starts coming through. And you're like, uh oh,
Well, that's the scene where Evie's asleep in her room because
that's right.
they
Yes,
lock her in her room and she's asleep, and Imhotep wants her, so he does the sand through her keyhole to get to her.
right. Because she was throwing a temper tantrum, like, you can't do this to me. And Rick just lifts her up. It's like, there you go. And then he locks the door. He's like, what does he says? She doesn't go in. Nobody goes in. She doesn't come out. You got that? And they're like,
Yeah.
um, and that was the point where I was like, dude, Brendan Fraser's badass. And so he's going in there, and doesn't he get scared of the cat first and then runs
Oh, yes.
away?
Yes, and this is another like nod to actual ancient Egyptian lore. The cats are the keepers of the underworld.
Hmm.
So if you are a mummy trying to return from the dead, a cat terrifies the hell out of you.
Yeah. So I think he sees the cat, runs away, and then when does he end up in the guy's room? Because that's what I was trying to get to, was that, and I don't remember when exactly he gets in there, because I know it all happens at once, like in one scene. So he ends up in there,
Hmm.
and I think the guy's asking who's there, and he's asking if it's any of his friends or anything. And
Hmm.
isn't he trying to shoot? He's got a gun and he's trying to shoot whoever's there because he thinks it's the mummy. Turns out it actually is the mummy. And
Not
then I
yet. Not
remember
yet.
he's okay.
It's the guy. It's the guy without the eyes and the tongue. So he hears
Right.
Imhotep. So he goes, "Who's there? Who's there?" But at this point, we did see Benny declare loyalty to the mummy
Yeah,
back
I
at the
forgot about
scene.
that. He's got his necklace of religious
Many
symbols, and he's just
things.
going through all of them. And it wasn't it the Star of David that
Yes, it
he
was
he
the
started
Jewish.
speaking.
Yes, yes. And he goes, "Oh, you know the language of the slaves. That's what the movie says.
Yeah,
What
I
the movie
always
says."
thought that scene was funny because he's just going through every single one, trying to say, speaking all languages until he just
He goes,
stopped.
"No, no,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
no."
um, yeah. So I forgot about that part. He does
Yeah.
basically pledge his loyalty to Imhotep. So now he is Imhotep's, or he is his servant.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, sorry. Continue with the guy with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bandages.
So, the guy's in there, no eyes, no tongue, and he goes, "Who's there? Who's there?" And Benny starts, basically talking to him for Imhotep, translating basically,
Yeah,
saying, you will be the first sacrifice in Imhotep's great return. And at that point, we find out that Imhotep can only become whole by reclaiming all of his canopic jars. So then we find out that he has to go get every single one of these guys that took a canopic jar,
Hmm.
and he's going to be the first one that gets claimed.
Right, and this scene was pretty cool because you see him lift him up, but you just see the shadow.
Yes.
And I think this is the part where the sand kind of, I remember from the commercials where the sand just comes through the windows and just starts spinning around, and he's like, whoa. And you see he gets lifted up, but you see in the shadow where he's just this whole, like, full of meat and bones dude. And then you see his skin just, and he's like, he basically disintegrates right then and there. And I think you then see Imhotep come off screen and just kind of look, and he's got like a little bit of skin, but he's still missing some, like, here, and I think he's still got the hole in his head. Um, but he's starting to
See
get
it
some
sort of
skin.
crawl through the
Right.
hole into his mouth, and he starts chewing
Is
on the
that the
scarab.
part where the scarab walks through? Okay, I do remember that. I remember my mom going, "Oh, gross."
It's so
It
nasty.
is nasty. Like, ew. So at this point, doesn't he try to get back into Evie's room? Or he does, because
So,
he's kissing her, right?
well, that was right when he saw the cat because he tried to kiss Evie, and the cat stepped on the piano and distracted him. And
Okay.
that's when he turned and saw the cat, freaked out, and then left. And that's when he went to the room to go disintegrate the first guy.
Okay. So I jumped ahead of myself because I remember Rick shows up and he says, "Look what I got," but I don't know if that was this scene.
No,
Okay.
no, it's later because the buddies hear this guy screaming when Imhotep is disintegrating him. But that's when they bust into that room to figure out what's going on, and they see Imhotep basically standing over them with a little bit of flesh and everything like
Right.
that. And that's when his buddy takes out his guns and starts shooting at Imhotep. And then they realize that, oh, he's scared of cats. And then Rick O'Connell holds up the cat and say, "Look what I got!" And he goes,
That's right.
"Ah!"
That's right. So then what happens after this? Because I'm drawing a blank on that, on the in between here and when the people become possessed by Imhotep. Don't they end up
So,
at the? Well, oh my God, we're forgetting all about Ardeth Bay, who shows up at some point.
oh yeah,
Because he was on the ship, he was on the cargo boat, and he's all
right.
like,
But
hey,
they didn't talk to him at that point.
yeah, they did
They
not talk to him. Oh, that's right. They go to the librarian, or the library where um home dude is, wheezing the juice guy. They go there, and that's when they see Ardeth Bay, and that's when he pulls out his guns, and they're like, "Whoa, what's he doing here?" And so, is this when you find out that he's also a magi?
well, we do meet him first, and we skipped over this part. This was my bad. We meet him first at Hominoptera before the locusts start swarming, and they because he comes up with his guys, they start burning down the
Mm-hmm.
tents and say, "You have 3 days
To
to
get up,
leave
yeah,
before we come back and move you out." But they still think, "Oh, he's the bad guy at this point." But it's not until they find him at the library, like you were saying, that the librarian says, "Hey, hold on. I've actually been working. My family have been working with his family for centuries and
that's what I meant. Yeah,
centuries." Yeah, and then we find out, oh, he is the good guy.
yeah, he's. You find out they're both good guys. You think, oh crap, yeah, because you think he's the bad guy. Um, and this is when they go into the whole, hey, we gotta, figure out how to do this. They're trying to figure out a plan, and this is when, if I'm not mistaken, this is when he accidentally sets the map on fire. He did the whole, oh my God, the map's on fire. Well, you did that on purpose so that they wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the map gets set on fire. They throw it on the guys like, oh well, I guess you can't find the place you're looking for, but they still know where it is. And then I think it's at this point when you hear, I think they do that close up shot of Imhotep in his, because right now we still have what, three cowboys left.
Yes, and it's at this point they discover that the only way to undo this is to find the Book of the Living. And so now they're trying to figure out where is this Book of the Living.
And it's in the
And
city of
then,
the dead,
then they
right?
also realize we have to protect the cowboys because they're the ones that took the canopic jars. And if he gets to them, he's full strength. And if he's
Yeah.
full strength, we're screwed.
Yeah, he wasn't exactly full strength yet because they do
No.
that close up shot of him, and it's I don't. I think they filmed this during the day and just put a blue filter tint on the camera because it did not look like nighttime to me, or it kind of looked like when the sun's going down and it's like that kind of sort of. It's still daytime, but it's turning into nighttime kind of thing. But you see
Well,
him. He comes
they
up and
did it on
he's go
yeah, they
ahead.
did it on purpose because that's one of the plagues, if you will, the one of the curses that gets
Mhm.
passed down is because you'll hear them say reached forth his hand and covered the sun.
Yeah,
So it was sunny outside, but they did this whole eclipse thing, and that was
that's
part of
right.
the curse.
That's right. They do show the eclipse, right? It goes
Yeah,
over the. Okay, I do remember that now. That was a pretty cool effect. It reminded me of Independence Day. So
yeah,
he comes up and he's looking ahead, but you get that shot of him just with his robe. And is it at this point when he kind of just gets the townspeople to, or the city to be under his spell, the
yeah,
boils and
yes.
everything, disgusting by the way. And I think he looks up. They're looking down, and
Hmm.
this is when he gets one of the cowboys.
Yes.
They're running around because they're not with Rick, right?
No, they separate for a little bit because Evie finds out that the Book of the Living is in uh, this statue of Ra, and they
Mhm.
think it's upstairs in that library. So they're upstairs when all this happens, and they look down and see Imhotep with the people,
But he's already
and then
got one of the jars. He's got
Im-
one of the jars from one of the guys, right?
yes, yeah. So we only have the one guy left that they're trying to protect. But they were upstairs. They looked down on Imhotep. Imhotep sends this swarm of people on them.
He also
They
shoots a
run
locust
away.
at him too.
Yes, yeah, they run away, and then the next thing we see is Imhotep in that same spot upstairs, thinking that he cornered them. But then he looks down and sees them get in a car. They're driving away, and Cowboy is sitting in the back seat of the car conveniently. And then that's when the townspeople grab him and pull him off, and Imhotep is able to get him and basically finish the job.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because some of the I remember, well, obviously the bandage guy. I remember how he got killed, and then the other two cowboys. I don't remember. One of them gets overpowered by the possessed people. I remember that he's
Yeah, that's the guy that was sitting in the back of the vehicle when they're
right. He
trying to
falls out.
drive off. They grab him and pull him.
That's right. He gets pulled out, but the guy with the long, like discount Brendan Fraser. I don't remember how he bites the dust,
he
but
gets he gets cornered by Imhotep basically, and he tries to give him the canopic jar back, like as if that was gonna stop
mhm.
the whole process. And Imhotep just takes it like thanks, but this is still gonna happen. And
Okay.
then I think that's the first one that you actually see the disintegration ceremony
Right,
happen.
right,
You
and they
actually
do that
see it.
same effect in the second movie too, which is kind of cool. Again, we'll talk about that one later. I can't wait. Um, but I do remember that Alan Parrish's dad, he's in the car with them too, and he's somehow no, was he not? I don't think he was with them. I think he gets cornered too.
No, he was in the car, because he gets pulled out and he's trying to fight the guys off, and Rick is saying, "Hey, get in the car, take my hand, get in the car." And he says, "No, get them out of here." And he just, tries to do a whole, honorable fight to the death. Kills a
Right,
couple of the townspeople, but then eventually they swarm him and overpower him.
they swarm him. And then there was the last guy because there was discount Brendan Fraser, and then there was the one guy that there was that third guy, and I don't remember what happened to him. So there was the librarian. He gets pulled out of the car. There was the other guy, bandage man, and then there was the third guy, the fourth guy, and I don't know what happened to him. His name was Mr. Daniels. So you
The
have
blonde,
okay,
there's a blonde haired guy.
you have Mr. Henderson, Mr. Daniels, Mr. Mr. Burns. Um, Mr. Henderson's the one that got the face taken off. Mr. Burns was the bandage guy, and then Mr. Daniels is the last one, and I don't remember what happens to him. But I know that the doctor, Dr. Alan Chamberlain, he's the one that got, like you said, he was trying to,
Hmm.
fight him off, and then also the other guy, the other bearded guy. I think he's the one you're thinking of. They got cornered, and he tries to fight him off, and somehow he gets killed too.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, they end up they're gone, but Imhotep is still here, uh, with the whole possessed village and everybody. And oh, That's when Jonathan runs around and he sees the team and he starts saying Imhotep and he's just walking with them and everything, because they're about to capture him. And he starts saying the name and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, that's right, we were doing this thing. But one of the actors, one of the extras, they had to put contacts in his eyes because he kept looking at the camera. So they're like, you need to stop looking at the camera. So they're like, you know what? Let's put some white contacts in your eye. There, problem solved. So if you look at the camera, nobody will notice. So yeah, it's this point where the only people left are Jonathan, Ardeth Bay, Evie, and Rick.
Hmm.
Cowboys and librarian guy are gone. They're dead. So
Hmm.
they have to. Oh no! Is this when he captures Evie?
Yes. So they captured Evie. Rick O'Connell tries to, be brave and fight him off, but she basically says, "Hey, he's not complete yet. He's still has one more guy to go. So you guys go find the Book of the Living. He's not gonna hurt me until he's complete.
His
So
power is
you
not
guys
over nine
guys
thousand
just
yet.
go." Yeah. And they Jonathan basically has to pull Rick O'Connell down through the tunnel and said, "Fight another day, basically. Fight another day."
Is that's when the guy gets that? Okay, now I remember. That's when the guy from the beginning, the other librarian guy, that's when he's like, "Go, I'm gonna fight them off," and he stays behind. And he's like, "Are you sure about this? I promise I won't wheeze the juice anymore." I'm sorry, that's the last time I'll make that joke. Um,
Oh, no, I remember because they cornered them. He didn't have Evie yet. He basically was saying, "Come with me, come with me."
mhm.
And she tried to bargain saying, "I will come with you, but you let my friends live." And he, said, "Fine, sure." So she went over there and then he told his people to kill them.
Right.
And, she started freaking out. And then that's when librarian guys started fighting them off, saying, "Go, go, get out." And then, basically sacrifice himself.
Yeah, he says it in another language. I don't know what was it Egyptian that he said it in, and because you saw the subtitle and he says kill him.
Yeah. Yes.
That's right. So they go into the sewer, and I think don't they come out of the sewer somewhere else?
Oh,
Because I'm
no, I
trying
don't
to
remember.
remember how they get to the cantina that they went to, when they went to go find Winston, who's it's coming up in the next scene.
Oh, yeah. Uh, yeah. So they come out basically in the desert because Winston's air station is out in the
Oh
desert.
yeah, and he's got this little station right there in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, where he's got his little record player and his little umbrella, and he's just chilling out there in his little oasis.
Right, and he's like, Winston, we need your help, and they go to the cantina, right, and this is when you see the water turn to blood, and you're like, oh, he's close. And this is in Cairo, so the whole time I'm watching this, going, Indiana Jones is probably running around over off screen somewhere, fighting those bad dudes. We won't say what they are here, but he's fighting those bad guys. Um, yeah, no, you see the thing turn to blood, and they're like, Winston, we need your plane. We need to get here, and that's the only way they can get there is to fly. So he goes, okay. The next scene, you see the plane flying. It's like, oh, cool. And you see him talking. You see Rick talking to Winston. You're like, well, hey, where's Jonathan and Arda? What the hell? And so he's like, you doing good, Winston? He's like, yeah. And he's like, what about you, Jonathan? You good? And he's holding on to the wing. And then Ardeth's on the other side, just like having a time of his life. And that's the only way they could get them to there was to have them hold on to the wing. And I thought that was the funniest thing. But Jonathan's like freaking out, like, oh my God, no, get me off this thing. But that's
Oh, did
when, sorry?
Bear's little face, like he's just like when he's strapped to the wing, his face, he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And his face is just like,
Yeah. And then this is when you see Evie and Imhotep and Benny. They're in the desert going to the same location, and this is when she kind of smiles, but then Imhotep's like, "Yeah, not on my watch." Does the whole sand wall with the face in it again? Another effect that was in the second movie. I'm gonna keep mentioning that because a lot of stuff that happens in this movie happened in the second movie too, but just different ways. So he's pushing the wall and he's doing his whole using the force and he's moving the sand wall around, and that was a really cool effect. I mean, it's scary as hell. If I saw a wall of sand with a face in it, I'd be terrified. So it takes over the plane and causes them
Mhm.
to crash.
Mhm.
So they crash. Rick gets out. Jonathan gets out. Ardeth gets out, but Winston is still there, and I think he just died from a heart attack. Right, is what was implied.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. So they're trying to get him. They're like, "Hey, you okay?" And he realizes he's dead.
Yeah.
Um, so they try to, they're sitting there, but then the plane starts sinking, and you're like, "Oh crap, it's quicksand!" And it just starts sinking into the quicksand, and they're like, "We gotta get out of here." So they have to, if I'm not mistaken, walk the rest of the way to get to
Mhm.
the city of Hamanamshra.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go ahead and let you take over from this part because I'm again, I might miss a point, and I don't want to miss anything.
So they fly in, they crash, they do a little, soldier send off as he goes
Yeah,
into the quicksand. They do have to walk the rest of the way, the three of them. Uh, Evie is, trying to hold down the fort, and they get her into the temple. They strap her to the table, and she looks next to her, and it is the corpse of Moon. And they pull out the Book of the Dead that was taken, and they start. Imhotep starts reading off the transcriptions, to basically transfer Moon's essence into Evie and make Evie basically into Moon and reincarnate her. Uh, but then you've got Rick coming in, doing his thing. But one thing I forgot to mention that goes into my absolute favorite world of Star Wars. Totally forgot to mention this. So one of the cloaks that was issued to one of the British soldiers in the beginning of the movie was actually found out to be the same cloak that was made for Alec Guinness
really,
in A New Hope. Yeah,
really.
it was his Obi-Wan cloak for A New Hope. And I was like, oh my god.
And speaking of Star Wars, this and Episode One came out about a week apart from each other, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly. I remember Episode One came out. It was the biggest movie of the year. Was Star Wars Episode One. Oh my god, we're getting a new Star Wars movie after so many years. That's all I gotta say about that. No, Phantom Menace wasn't that bad. We'll talk about it later, but yeah, I didn't know that. That's very, very, very interesting. I'm at the really am gonna have to watch this movie again and see all these little inside things we've talked about. Um, so yeah, they're at the city of Hamanaptra, and you see um the corpse of Moon, and he's trying to bring her back to life. And it basically is going to be the same thing. He's going to bring her back to life, but she's going to take the soul of Evie so that she can get all her skin and bits and everything put back together. Um, and I think it's at this point when Rick and all them get in there, right?
Mhm.
And they're
Yeah,
trying to
they
find it. And
bust up the party.
I'm sorry.
They
Oh,
bust up the
yeah, yeah,
party.
yeah, yeah. They bust up the party, and I think doesn't Benny again run away because he's a coward?
Basically.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
runs away.
He starts looting all the gold in the
Right. He
temple.
finds the room of gold and he's looting everything. And I think it's at this point when Imhotep brings his guards to life, his
Mhm.
guards again, and they're
Well,
all running around and everything. And oh, I forgot about the part where Jonathan got a beetle in his shoulder.
yes.
He does the same thing the other guy does, the warden. He's
Yeah.
like, oh, what are these jewels? And he's picking them off. He's like, look at this thing, and it does the same thing. Goes into his arm. And he's freaking out. So it goes
Oh,
right
yeah.
here into his shoulder. That's when they stop it and just cut it out, and he flicks it, and it falls down. It's like, and Rick just bam. You can do that in the Mummy video game too. It's kind of cool. The shooting the beetles. I hate them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I forgot about
That's
that part. Really
the
gross.
most yeah, it's the
Really
most
gross.
Rick O'Connell thing you could possibly do. It just, oh, hold still, flick out your knife and just
Yeah, and it was like what, a butterfly knife that he just kind of boop, popped it out of his shoulder.
yeah.
So yeah, that I forgot about that part. But then yeah, you see the guards coming through, and they jump up, and they're just jumping all over the place like spider monkeys. And what is like four of them? I don't remember if this is the first one, if this happened in this one or the second one, but they scream at him, and he
It's the
screams
first one.
back.
Yeah, it's the first one. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the first one.
He screams back, and he says, um, and he just walks away. And so they're all fighting the priests and everything, and you're just like,
Mhm.
God, they're gonna get out of this. So it's at this point, I believe, when Jonathan gets the book, they find the book they need, and he's trying to read the things, but he doesn't know hieroglyphics. So Evie's fighting an ox on the moon, and she's trying to tell him the same thing. You know what? This happened in the second movie too. Same exact scene, but again, we'll talk about that one when we get there. So
Mhm.
they're fighting and everything, and she's telling him each of the things. He's like, "Oh, it's like a bird or a stork," and she says, "What is it, a menaphis?"
Yeah,
And
I've never.
he says it, and then that's what happens after that point when he says the final thing.
Menaphys, so that's when the basically not the curse, but the solution, I guess you could say, to the curse starts taking place where the demons of the underworld, I guess you could call them, start coming in and grabbing Imhotep and start pulling him back into like this black
That's
gelatinous
right.
pool. Uh, they they take Anoxuna Moon because she's somewhat resurrected. She's like halfway
Right.
resurrected, walking around in her mummy body. But as soon as he finishes that, the guards no, she finds the transcription that turns the guards on themselves, that
Yes.
takes
Okay.
control. So Jonathan knew how to read that transcription by himself. He didn't need help, so he
Right.
was able to turn the guards, and the guards killed Anoxuna Moon, turned on her, killed her. Then he read the main part of the transcription against Imhotep. He just forgot the last one. That was
Yeah.
like, it's a bird, a stork. But
Yeah.
as soon as he finished that one, the demons come out of this black gelatinous pool and start pulling Imhotep back in.
That wasn't
And
the
you start
best
seeing his
CGI.
face fall apart again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember that part because I know that the second movie kind of ended the same way, but he gets
Yeah.
pulled down into a bunch of hands, a bunch of arms and stuff. It looked like God of War when he's coming out of hell.
Yep.
Kratos, I'm sorry. So yeah, so they're pulling him apart and everything. Oh, one cool part in this scene though was Rick is also fighting Imhotep and he cuts his arm off. And he grabs his arm and he just goes whoop, whoop, just twists it back on and I'm like, "Oh, okay. All right. I guess that's one way to do it. Cool."
I
Um
do have to correct what I said because I said something wrong and I just remembered it.
what was that?
The phrase that they said from the book did not kill Imhotep, it made him human. So it basically took his immortality away. So he
Okay.
was just mortal. Because Jonathan was even like, he's not dying, he's not dying. And Evie was like, no, he's human now. And that's when Rick was able to stab him in the stomach. And then he starts walking backwards and falling into this gelatinous black pool
Okay,
and starts
it
falling
was this
apart.
one. I don't know why I thought it was the
Yeah.
Mummy Returns when he so they if I remember he runs up, they're running at each other and he stabs Imhotep. Okay, yeah, that's right. I do remember because that's when like you said, he starts backing up, and that's how he falls into things. Because I couldn't remember how he fell into the gelatinous pool of bad CGI. Um, so yeah, that's he falls in there, and it's at this point when they're like, "Yo, we gotta get out of here. This place is falling apart." And so they're getting out of there. Meanwhile, we don't know where Ardeth Bay is, and they because you think he's dead, right? I skipped over that part. He's like, I'm gonna take care of this, and he runs into the priests and everything and starts fighting him. So you think, okay, well he sacrificed himself, he's gone or whatever, he's dead. Cool. They get out and they're sitting there, and Jonathan's like, oh, holding his, thank God we're out of there. And you see this hand come down. He freaks out, and you see it's Ardeth Bay. You're like, oh, okay, cool. He's
Mhm.
still alive. Awesome. And at this point, he goes, no, flashes back to Benny.
Yeah.
He's still in the gold room, and he's trying to get as
Yeah.
much as he can, but he doesn't know that the tomb is closed, and he's kind of
Well, he does. He does because Rick and Evie and Jonathan
yeah,
run
yeah, yeah,
past him because the stuff is starting to fall. And everybody runs past him saying, "Hey, we gotta go, we gotta go." And he's like, "Oh, let me grab this one last thing, one last thing." And Rick's like, "Dude, come on," because that brick wall is
yeah.
descending. And he reaches for Benny's hand, trying to pull him in, but he's weighed down by all the gold, and he won't let it go. And then, of course, time runs out, and he
Yeah.
goes, "Goodbye, Benny."
Yeah, and he's stuck. He just says it like, whatever, bye.
Yeah.
And so Benny's like, oh crap. And that is like a fear of mine. That's like not
Oh,
really
yes.
claustrophobia, but being stuck inside something like that, knowing you cannot get out.
Yep. Mm-mm.
And so he lights a match, and he's like, "I'm gonna light this match," but then it starts to burn out, and you hear the scarabs. Give me 1 second. All right, so yeah, the whole getting stuck in somewhere where you can't get out, a fear of mine, and that's part of. I didn't tell you about it beforehand when before we recorded, but I had a dream once where I was stuck in a Egyptian tomb of some kind, and this just reminded me of that. So it kind of scared me a little bit, just being stuck where you can't get out. Anyways, he lights the match, and it burns out, and that's when you hear all the scared beetles come out, and you're just like, well, Benny, you're don't you hear like a chomp or a crunch
Yeah,
when
you hear the chomp and the crunch, and then you hear Benny scream.
right, and he is done. He goes on into Van Helsing as Igor.
Yeah.
um so yeah, then it goes over to Rick and crew, and they're all out there, and this is when you find out that Ardeth Bay's still alive. He grabs the hand of he grabs Jonathan's shoulder, and it's like, oh, he's alive. And I think Jonathan makes the comment of, we didn't even get any treasure. But then you find out as they're going away, he's got all the treasure on his camel. So he did get treasure. And that is how they, isn't that how they get all the fancy schmancy, nice houses and everything in the second movie?
Um, so Jonathan had apparently made it out with not Jonathan, excuse me. Benny had made it out with one load of treasure to the camels first, and then he went back in for another load, and that's
Right.
when he got
Okay.
trapped. So yeah, when they came out and took the camels and took off, they didn't realize they had a whole treasure load on the camels. But part of their big wealth in the second movie was that everybody, all the colleges that had been denying Evie her residency, like at Cambridge and all the other like really big famous colleges,
Okay.
she had applied to be a professor at these colleges, and nobody gave her any credit because she didn't have any street cred underneath
Yeah.
her name. But now all these things happen, and they're like, "Oh God, please come work with us. We'll throw all this money at you."
Right. Okay. So I kind of remember that about Evie's application and everything. I never really put the two together. I always thought that was how they got the wealth, was from all the gold and jewels they found at the end of the first movie. But now you said it's not it's not the case. So interesting. But like I said, guys, we'll talk about that in a future episode. So that is basically it for the Mummy. Any final thoughts on the movie as a whole?
Uh, it's such a classic, and if you are one of the few people who haven't seen it, I can't recommend it enough. It's so much comedy. It's horror without being horror.
Hmm.
But I mean, there's it's so good. It's so good, especially being released in 1999.
Yeah.
It's hard to touch it. So it's a classic.
Yeah, I feel it still holds up, and some of my final thoughts are just basically like, again, it's still a great movie. I still love this movie to this day. I love watching it whenever it's on TV. I know that it was they were trying to do this reboot of all the monster movies and everything, and this was the first one, and really they haven't done. If you ask me, they haven't really done a great job getting them going again, because they tried again with Dracula Untold, and that didn't do so well. The Wolfman didn't do so well. Then you had The Invisible Man came out. You had the Tom Cruise Mummy, which mm,
Mm-mm. Nope.
there is a reference to this movie in that one that I got so excited for, and that's probably the only thing I liked about the movie. Is the only thing I remember about that movie is that one little Easter egg. Other than that, I was like, I don't remember anything from that movie. Um, could have been better, but as far as this Mummy goes, yeah, it's a classic, great movie, definitely worth watching. I say this one and the second one are worth watching. The last one, it shouldn't have been made. If you ask me, they shouldn't have made it. But
No.
we can discuss that one in a future episode if you want. I don't have much to say about the third movie. The first two are the ones that are my favorites of the trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, great movie. I do want to play through the game again on my channel. What I was thinking was, getting some gameplay going, and then we just kind of watch the gameplay and just discuss it as we go through, like how bad some areas look or how compare it to the movie. I guess is it as good as the movie? So that kind of thing. That's kind of what I want to do with some of the video games that were movies, like movie tie-ins, just see if they're as good as the movie. 9 times out of 10, they might not be, but you never know. You might be surprised by some of them.
Yeah. I mean, always give it a shot, I say.
Yep, yep, and it's always good to have a second person doing a reaction video to some of these games, to just because I'm usually like, God, this wasn't that good, that wasn't that good. It's always good to have a second person to react to the video game or the videos with me. But yeah, that's about it. That's all I have for the Mummy, unless you want to add anything, that you think they could have done better in the movie, or was it perfect?
I mean, I wouldn't say perfect because, like I said, there is the whole historical license that they
Yeah.
did. But I mean, I can't sit here and say, oh, they should have fixed this, fix this. I loved it. I enjoy the whole thing, beginning to end. It's always going to be on one of my favorite lists.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's definitely one of my favorites as well. It's in my top 10. Um yeah, as for our next video, guys, it is still going to be related to monsters in some way, just vampires this time around. And that could be a number of movies because there are so many movies out there about vampires. So hopefully I'll check that out. I do want to say, thank you all for watching. I really hope you've been enjoying these episodes we've been doing. I like to, I'm really glad we got Tessa here to discuss these movies with me because, like I said in the last episode, it's always good to have somebody else with as big a love of movies or video games or what have you as much as you do. Like you could be somebody who's like I love comic books, and it's good to have somebody else who's as into comic books as you are to discuss. So again, thank you for helping out with this and being here. Um, where can people find you? And remember, guys, all the links are going to be down below in the description.
So pretty much everything Twitch, YouTube, Discord is all going to be the Boomer Sooner 6714. The only thing that's not going to be under that is going to be TikTok, and that is what in the huh, and what in the is THA, all one word, underscored HUH. But yeah, come check me out. Hit me up with any questions. Let me know any kind of movies you want us to talk about on here, and we'll get to it.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of monster movies in there, like horror movies and sci-fi and all that stuff. The big stuff like Star Wars, though, we're gonna dedicate to like multiple episodes. Like there's a lot to say about Star Wars. But no, yeah. As for me, you can find me here pretty much every day. I'm posting either a YouTube short or a premiere for a playthrough I'm doing, or a stream every Tuesday, Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Right now, depending on when this goes live, I could still be playing Tomb Raider. I might have moved on to something else on Tuesdays, and then Thursdays are dedicated to horror games. Just depends on what I'm playing. Like I said, Wednesdays are well, so Mondays are right now they are my wrestling videos. So I like to do some WWE videos. I throw those up on Monday. Wednesdays are premieres of just whatever I'm playing off stream, and then this show is actually going to be premiering Fridays. For the time being, it'll be Fridays, and each one of those, every premiere stream, what have you, goes live at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. The YouTube shorts are usually early in the morning, like 8:30 ish or so. So those happen in the morning. Just knock them out early in the day, get them out of the way. Sometimes I will post like two in a day, like one in the morning, one in the afternoon, if I have a spare one just laying around. But that's pretty much what you can find here. If you're a fan of retro gaming, horror gaming, you name it, this is the place to be. And Tessa is actually one of my mods on my streams, so you definitely see her there as well. Other than that, guys, unless you have anything else, I think we're pretty much done for the episode.
I guess the only other thing I'll throw in there is Star Wars. I mean, if you're watching Mando, if you're just getting caught up on Mando, you can check out my Mando breakdown with some of my other buddies on the Breakdown podcast on YouTube. Come have a conversation with us. Let us know what you think. But yeah, I'm excited to keep talking about movies and video games.
Yeah.
This is fun. I'm having fun.
Yeah, I mean, I have a list of movies that, at least for the first few episodes, and after that, I'm like, damn, I gotta figure out what other movies we can talk about. But yeah, we got a lot of good movies here, even some that are just, the obscure movies too that people might not have heard of. Definitely, some stuff I want to talk about. Like I think I wanted to talk about The Pest at one point. I don't even know if anybody besides us knows what that movie is. But yeah,
I
no.
haven't seen anybody that does.
Again, thank you guys, and we'll catch you all in the next episode. Y'all have a good one.
Bye.